I'd say it's the biggest deal going on in my life. That was not necessarily a surprise to me, the way I was raised and the way that my father talked to me about fatherhood. Kind of led me to expect that that was going to be my primary job, but it's certainly there's nothing else that has made me feel more masculine than being a dad. And Father's Day remains my favorite holiday just because of what it represents. And to me, that's the most important job I've got. I think I will probably say 100 times over the course of this interview is that the most important thing that you can do is be an example of what right looks like, and that all the parallels between leadership and parenting that we're probably in stuff that we'll talk about later is it comes down to that over and over and over again, is that you are the example of what a man is. And I think that is true for a parent of boys or a parent of girls. The dad is the example. That is what a man is. And that in wrapped up in that is just incredible responsibility. But that there's also some freedom in that, and that is recognizing that that is the most important thing that you can do is be that example. Well, that captures a lot of things. So how you handle your own emotions and how you handle your own conflicts and challenges is all training. That's all a lesson of how a man encounters these things and deals with problems, deals with emotions.
Welcome to the Daughter Podcast, where fathers become everyday heroes in their daughters' lives. Grow, evolve, and lead with love. Here's your host, Oscar Pena.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Daughter Podcast. Oscar here, your local growing girl dad. And as you all know, the Daughter Podcast, and my goal is to always find perspectives. Well, today we have some, I would say, dramatic change of perspectives, but I think they're going to be really useful. Today I have William Spears with me, who is one, a fellow military member, and two, a father of sons, but also a scholar of Stoicism. And we're going to get into a bunch of all these things as we get going. But William, man, how are you and what have you been up to on this Veterans Day?
Oscar, wait, this is a Daughter Podcast? I thought I was in the Navy submarine philosopher podcast. I got lost, man.
Surprise.
Yeah. No, I'm doing great. For the listeners, we were recording on Veterans Day, and neither one of
That's
us,
right.
when we set this up, both of us didn't miss the fact that this was Veterans Day. And so, we're before we recorded, we were talking about what we were doing today. And mainly I spent it hanging out with my kids, playing video games, and exactly what I felt like doing.
Very cool.
Yeah, before we get going, I do need to say, because I am actively serving in the Navy, it is important for me to say that anything I say here is just representative of my own opinion. I am William C. Spears here talking. If I, endorse some product or something, or say that Nickelback sucks or something, like that's not the Navy's opinion. The Navy loves Nickelback, So if I don't say that, then inevitably I'll say something dumb, and someone will say, the government said this. So anyway, yeah.
Well, ditto, and that's why I didn't know to join the Navy. So
there are plenty of good reasons.
Yeah. Well, welcome, man. I'm glad to have you here. I'm really excited to get this conversation going and just see those perspectives that you and I have differently, not because we're in different services, but because we are in different services. I've got, I service a house full of girls, and you have the opposite.
Yeah.
Before we get started, give us a little bit of your background about you growing up, a little bit of sibling information, and just kind of your view of fatherhood from where you started to where you are now.
Sure. So I come from small town Louisiana. I have excellent relationships with my parents. They're my mom and my dad are both great. They divorced whenever I was like 3 or something, and both remarried to great people. And no trauma there. All happy relationships. I'm very, very close to my dad, and his example of what a father is and what a man is has been very important to me, kind of through the whole journey. I joined the Navy right out of high school, as like a lot of guys in small towns do. I went into the Navy nuclear propulsion program to go be a technician on a nuclear powered vessel. And from there, basically, before I completed all the training and made it out to a vessel, I was immediately applying to schools,
Mm.
any kind of way. I was advised by my parents of like, hey, if you can put up with the military, there's lots of opportunity there, and they
Mhm.
were right. And so I ended up going to the Naval Academy, and from there I liked the direction of the nuclear power program and the submarine service and everything like that. So I majored in mechanical engineering and went back into submarines as an officer, and that's kind of where I've been ever since. So I've been my career has I've served on 3 submarines, 2 attack submarines, and 1 ballistic missile submarine as the second in command. And I'm now working in the Pentagon, looking at spreadsheets and of
Mm.
how expensive ships are. They're really expensive, it turns out.
Yeah.
Uh, you anyway, and I'll be going back to sea here in a year or two, God willing. But
Yeah.
we're living here in DC with my wife and 3 boys. But that's kind of me in a nutshell. But
Okay.
happy family life. My experience as a father has been, extremely formative. And like I said, it's definitely my most important job.
Absolutely. And that's a job that uh, I think maybe I should just speak for myself as a career person. For a while, you think that's what it is, but then as soon as your kids get here, they kind of flip the script on you. And if you embrace it, I think what you said comes out is that's the most important job I have now, right? It's
Yeah.
being the example, raising my kids, and giving
And
back to them.
yeah, and like by an order of magnitude, it's like not even close. It's not even on
Yeah.
the same planet. Like in all these other jobs I have, and I've got some important jobs, but I'll be replaced in a microsecond if I
Yeah.
don't show up. But
That
if
is not a lie.
if I don't show up to being dad, like nobody's showing up. There's no cavalry coming, you know.
Right. Yeah. No,
And
that's a great point.
now that being said, I think there is something to, and it was really an army guy who pointed this out to me because as we all do, we struggle with leaving home and being absent,
Hmm.
and am I depriving my kids of my presence in pursuit of this job that I like, or this
Hmm.
adventure, or whatever other things, but there's something to be said for being an example of service. And
Hmm.
provided they recognize and they understand, I do not want to leave home. I do not like
Right.
leaving them ashore whenever I go to sea. Uh, but I have to do it because it is my job. That example is very important. And
Right.
and allowing them to see that I'm going in this tube and going away, and I don't like that, but I'm going to come back, and I will come back.
Hmm.
That allowing them to see that, hey, this is what a man does, even though he doesn't like
Yeah.
it.
Hey, if you enjoy the Daughter Podcast, you'll love what we've got waiting for you at daughterpodcast.com. As soon as you visit, you'll be prompted to join our new email newsletter, a resource packed with valuable insights, practical tips, and powerful perspectives straight from our podcast episodes and incredible guests. Don't miss out on the chance to join the community and strengthen your journey as a father. Visit daughterpodcast.com today and subscribe, because great dads never stop growing. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And one thing that I've learned because of the requirement that the job takes is to be more present when I am home. Uh, I say that again, not from a pulpit, but from the trench, meaning I'm working specifically on that to actually take those moments when I am home and be as fully present as I can in the little tiny conversation or the big conversation or the little moment or big moment, trying to physically be present, but also just like actually be present. Because one thing that I know for me would start to come into play is, well, my team is doing other things, but I'm not with them, and so now I'm not present at home, but I'm also not present there, and then really you're not helping anybody, and
Yeah,
that's something that I started to learn too late in the game.
man, That not from the pulpit, but from the trench. I'm totally writing that down. That's going in the book because that's good.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before, but I find myself, worrying that I'm preaching when I'm really
Right.
trying to say like, hey, this is the thing I'm struggling with, and I struggle with it. It's not easy. you know?
There's a really big difference, right? Like for you churchgoers, like you've been to a sermon or a church where like someone is preaching at you and almost making you feel like you're horrible. Like
Yeah.
that's not this guy. I'm digging in the same trench everybody's digging, and I'm just trying
Yeah.
to get information to make that trench a little bit better. That's really what I'm doing, right? And so I hurry to say those things because social media is interestingly brutal, and people take a lot of time to put really interestingly brutal things on social media, and I'm like, I'm not preaching at you. The whole reason I'm here is because I get to interview other fathers and other people to get perspectives so that I can then put them into play and try to be better,
Yeah.
every day. And so yeah, so I started to really think about that. I'm like, no, not at the pulpit. I'm I'm looking over the trench and telling you that, hey, this is how I did it. Come show, come
Yeah.
see, or
There's
tell me how you did it because my trench sucks.
social media is especially toxic. It encourages that preaching too, that like
It
awful,
sure does.
because
Absolutely.
I discovered recently, because this is completely not what we're on the podcast to talk about, but like getting all into the book promotion game and everything, and trying to figure out the algorithms and stuff like it's a completely losing game. You're never going to win the attention market. But
Yes.
in exploring it and trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do, I discovered there's this thing called LinkedIn broetry. If you ever spend any time on LinkedIn, you will notice that certain people will write these posts that are a certain way that'll like, it'll be a sentence and then the blank and then a sentence and then something like great about them that makes them sound awesome. And I'm like,
Okay.
well, I'm definitely not doing that.
Interesting.
And they're like, it's made to make the algorithm, make people click and repost and crap like that. I'm like, yeah, well, you guys win
Wow.
the attention game. I'm not going to compete with that.
I
Anyway,
don't
I'm
have the
sorry that
mental fortitude. No, I just don't have
no.
the mental fortitude to dig through that. That's I didn't know that. That's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like if you go on, I
Okay.
don't know how much time you spend on LinkedIn, but if you go on there, you'll notice like every other post is this crap. And it's like, you can tell what guy is trying to generate reposts by, they follow this certain formula. And you're just like, you guys win.
Who put the formula out there?
Well, it's just something that people have figured out.
Okay.
I don't know who invented it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I love the word broetry for it, because
Yep.
if you Google this, you'll see all kinds of crap on it.
That's
It's funny.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, I asked because like the dude, I think he's a CEO of Instagram, will go on Instagram and like tell you how to use Instagram, but
Yeah.
then he'll go on the next week and tell you something completely opposite of what he told you the week before. So it's like he's telling you how to use the algorithm, and then they go and change the algorithm, and then he's telling you something. It's just like I can't keep up with you people. Like I just whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put whatever I put.
I'm officially old in that I just can't like make Instagram fun. Like it's not that I can't figure it out. Like I see it now. I just like, I don't see the appeal. I'm like,
Yep. Yeah,
why
yeah.
is this fun? Like, I don't know. Whatever. You guys can have it.
Well,
I'm old. Anyway.
you in your intro, you did not mention your books, but I do want to go there because you took us into that area,
Okay.
and I definitely want to talk about your work with your writing. What does that
Okay.
look like?
So, and that actually has some play in being a parent, because
Yeah,
I've just recently finished the book. Like it actually releases this week, in the US. But
congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, it's awesome. I wrote a book just because I'm a huge geek of philosophy. That the book is called Stoicism as a Warrior Philosophy, and what it basically is a deep dive into Stoicism, the philosophy, and how it plays into the morality of warfare and the morality
Okay.
of military service. And so it's like a heavy like reference based. It's not like an intro, my first Stoicism book. It's like, it's very academic. And you never really realize how defiant of an elevator pitch your book is until you're like standing in front of an admiral and he says, "You wrote a book on what?" So anyway, this is a thing. It's a long story, but I've been into Stoicism since I was in like college. It's like over
Okay.
20 years ago, and when it started blowing up about, 10, 15 years ago in the kind of popular sphere, I figured someone needed to write something about it in the military. It's like a matter of time before there's some like Navy SEALs secrets to using Stoicism to be a badass killer or something. I'm
Right.
like, okay, someone's going to put out something stupid. Let me try to get ahead of that and write something like serious about this to actually
Right.
look at the academics of it. And so that's what that project was. And it took forever, and I mean, I'm not, it's basically on shore duties that I've been writing it. Whenever you're in the Navy, you'll spend some time, like a few years
Hmm.
assigned to an office somewhere or something. And then you'll spend a few years assigned to a ship. And when that
Okay.
ship goes to sea, you're on it. And whenever it's in port, you're working on it, tearing it up and managing the maintenance and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's kind of the Navy sea shore rotation. So when I've been attached to submarines, I'm not doing any writing, but whenever I've been on shore duty, in grad school and stuff like that, that's whenever when I should be studying in class, instead I'm like looking up Marcus Aurelius and stuff and
Right.
getting deep in the weeds there. And it's been several years. It's a miracle that I, got published, because it's a real weird book and publishers don't like weird, but I was able to get someone's attention, and so they agreed to it. And I'm very proud of it. The book is way better than the author, which is possible whenever you're dealing with really good ideas from
Mm.
like thousands of years ago.
Right.
So, they're not really my ideas.
There's a company extremely dedicated to restoring the dignity of hard work and the relentless pursuit of greatness. That company is Fuel Hunt, and I am honored and humbled to have them as our sponsor. They have built a community that is all about choosing discipline over comfort and taking pride in the journey, because comfort is a slow death. Their clothing isn't just apparel or fight gear, it is our uniform. 100% American made, Fuel Hunt clothing is a daily reminder for me and those around me that I am committed to being among the few who truly hunt for their goals. Join the movement today and wear your ambition proudly. Everybody wants to eat, but only a few will hunt. Follow the link in the show notes and use GrillDad at checkout for 10% off your purchase.
Well, I find it interesting that you write about Stoicism, and that's one of the things that you and I talked about is the perspectives that we have in our fathering,
Mhm.
but then also how Stoicism comes in or can come in a father's life, and how useful it can be. Now, I also read Stoicism, and I like it. I obviously I wouldn't say I'm a Stoic, because that's like beyond my comprehension as to how you get there.
Yeah.
However,
What are the necessary and sufficient conditions of a Stoic?
right.
Yeah.
What I will say is it's interesting to read some of this stuff and realize that thousands of years ago, men were thinking similarly to now, and how to control their emotions and how to show up for things and do things. And it's just an interesting thought. Like, I think Ryan Holiday had mentioned that as well in one of the writings. Like, a long time ago, someone was also thinking of this one thing that you're thinking of, and so it puts humanity in perspective, I guess. Like, right?
Well, these ideas cut to the truth of like what it means to be a human being, and that's
Yeah.
that's part of the reason I don't like to write about current events, because it's
Mm.
not going to be relevant tomorrow. I like to talk about stuff that was relevant 2,000 years ago and will be relevant 2,000 years from now.
Right.
And the principle that's at play there is survivorship bias. It's the same reason that we still study Shakespeare in high school,
Mm.
and it's the same reason that we say that the classic rock songs music was so much better, 20 years ago,
Mhm.
or 50 years ago than it is now. It's because we don't listen to all the crappy music from that time. The
Right.
stuff that we still pay attention to is the best of that era, and
Mhm.
everything else has been forgotten. And there will be, who knows what the songs are that are on the radio today that will be listened to 100 years from now, but there are guaranteed to be some
Mhm.
really good stuff, and there's guaranteed to be some really good philosophy produced today. And there was a lot of crappy philosophy produced 2,000 years ago. We just don't
Right.
talk about it.
Right.
The Stoics were among the very best ideas of that era. And what they were really getting at is the idea of what it means, what a human being is supposed to be. But part of that is, self-control and wisdom and all these things that play into management of your emotions and management of yourself. And so a lot of the kind of popular takes on Stoicism are preoccupied with this emotional control and equanimity thing. That's just part of it. That's an expression of virtue. It's not that Stoicism isn't about emotional control. It certainly is, but Stoicism is about virtue. And a virtuous man is wise, courageous, self-controlled, and just. And all those things play together. There's this big Venn diagram. They all kind of overlap and reinforce one another. If you are deficient in one, you're going to be deficient in all. And self-control and equanimity and stuff like that, that's an expression of that state. And so they're basically thinking through all these ways of dealing with information that you receive throughout the day, and trying to think of how to think about what I'm experiencing in such a way that reinforces those principles. And that's kind of why Stoicism, I argue, is extremely useful for the military, because it just jumps out of the page of
Right.
the applications there.
Well, I can see what drew you to Stoicism. Before I get into how that relates to being a father, tell me about you becoming a father. When it happened, kind of your mindset before it started, and those sort of things. Give me a little bit of that view before I start getting into how Stoicism's either changed or set you up for being a father.
Yeah. I have to be very careful to, acknowledge that my story is idyllic, and it's everything worked like right, and I'm just
Right.
so extremely lucky. It's not just because I did everything right, it's because in spite of all the things I did wrong, it has worked out wonderfully, where, I married a wonderful woman who I love very much, and only one. And, we wanted to have kids, and we did, after being married without kids for a couple of years. And so it kind of worked out on time and according to plan, to the extent that, this is the thing that nature most expects not to work according to plan.
Right.
You
Absolutely.
know? And so I'm very fortunate in all those regards. But
Yeah.
we wanted to have kids, and we knew that when we got married. Like, that was part of the conversation. All these things, they shouldn't be a surprise,
Right.
and so I'm lucky there. But I recognize there's lots of single dads out there, lots of divorced dads, or remarried step parents, and all these things, and they're all very relevant too. And I lucked out, and I'm not in that scenario.
Right.
So.
Hey, if you enjoy the Daughter Podcast, you'll love what we've got waiting for you at daughterpodcast.com. As soon as you visit, you'll be prompted to join our new email newsletter, a resource packed with valuable insights, practical tips, and powerful perspectives straight from our podcast episodes and incredible guests. Don't miss out on the chance to join the community and strengthen your journey as a father. Visit daughterpodcast.com today and subscribe, because great dads never stop growing.
Well, part of the reason I asked the question, for me, we didn't have children for 8.5 years of our marriage. So it was just my wife and I.
Yeah.
By choice. We married young, and we wanted to kind of grow together and get to know each other. And I think it was a good thing. 22 years later, I'm glad we did that. Right. But one thing I can say is I didn't think it all the way through once the children talk started. I was like, oh, yeah, it's kind of time. Like, we're not getting any younger. Obviously, my wife wanted to have children, so I was not going to deny her that either. But I can tell you, for me, I didn't think it through, in the sense of, like, I didn't mentally prepare for the things that actually would happen. So if I would take it back to, like, a Stoic principle where they're like, hey, think before you start your day, think of the things that you're probably going to face in the day, right? The people you'll face, the problems you'll face, the thing. I didn't do any of that. And so to find out I'm having a girl, I was like, well, wait a minute. We said kids. We didn't say girls, right? Like, I know it sounds funny, but I'm like, what? I don't know how to do that. Like, how are we going to do that? And so the person I am now, inevitably, just like any other father, whether in your situation, my situation, in any situation, you're a different person after your kids than you were before your kids.
Yeah.
At least the way I feel in the conversations I've had. Not bad or good or indifferent. It's just you're if you allow it, your kids are going to change you as you
Yeah.
go through raising them, and they're kind of raising you at the same time. It's just weird, and
Yeah.
so that's kind of where that question comes from.
Your responsibility just goes off the page, just goes
Yeah,
off the chart of the little graph of what your responsibility for and
right.
your meaning in this life. I had a badass motorcycle, before my first kid, and like it just wasn't fun to ride anymore. I'm just
Right.
like, this is just silly. This seems like I am, being irresponsible here. And
Right.
so I sold it, and got rid of it and didn't miss it. It was just like
Right.
I'm different now. And one of the things that I struggled with a lot leading up to being a father, I thought a lot that I like who I am. I expect to change. I expect my priorities will change, but when I'm in my 20s, I'm like super career driven and super ambitious and all this stuff. And I know that eventually I'm going to be a father, and now that's going to be the most important thing. And that's just lame. I'm going to be suburban and like tuck in my collared shirts and wear tennis shoes and with jeans and stuff, and now I do all those things and I'm like, yeah, I don't care, cause but I view it now, it's like, it's more like, well, I was cool and I graduated from that. It's not that,
Right.
I'm shame. I'm not cool anymore. It's just
Yeah.
like all those things, they're just trinkets. Like I don't care about them,
Right.
I don't, they're nothing compared to what actually matters. They're
Yeah.
just toys, they're old toys. And that I think put a lot of things into perspective, and that is a view that you see a lot in the Stoic philosophy too, is
Right.
recognizing these things that the Stoics call them indifference,
Mm.
material things that are not reflective of my virtue, they're just things that can be taken away from me at any time, no matter how hard I work to earn this material thing.
Yeah.
How much I run and work out and eat right, I can still get sick tomorrow and
Hmm.
be medically disqualified, and now I'm no rank.
Right.
I can there's so many things outside of my power that can just cause all these things to evaporate, and that is a very good test for, is this a moral factor that I'm thinking about right now?
Hmm.
And if it's not a moral factor, it's probably it's just a trinket, and it's gonna go away at some point. you
Right.
know that's been very powerful.
With your study of Stoicism in raising sons, what stood out to you that maybe perception wise is different if you were to be raising daughters?
Well, I'll tell you something that I struggle with
Mm.
a lot, that I don't think I would struggle with if I had daughters, and there are plenty of other things that I would, you know. But one of the things that I do struggle with is just me, Will Spears. Like I don't care about a lot of the like guy things that dads are supposed to like teach their kids to play sports and how to throw a ball
Okay.
and how to go fishing and how to go hunting and go camping and stuff. Like I just don't. I never have. I never liked any
Mm.
of those things as a kid. I was a video game nerd. I eventually learned how to lift weights and like, oh, I like that. And so
Right.
I'm a stronger nerd, but I'm still, you know, and so I see other dads out, throwing the ball and stuff. And like, I'm like, well, I guess I should get a ball. And I'm like, oh, I gotta learn. I'm like watching YouTube videos on how to throw a baseball and stuff,
Right.
and so I worry about that, no matter how much I reason about it and logic about it, I still worry about it.
Yeah.
And I try. And we lucked out in a lot of ways that like we got into the scouts, and
Okay.
my wife happens to like woodworking and like camping and stuff like that. And shows she's just an excellent, den leader and is really good with the kids in that regard. And
Hmm.
I'm like, I don't know, honey, I'll come help. Like if you need something
Right.
carried, like I'll, I'll
Right.
carry the heavy thing from spot to spot. I'm good at that, you know. Anyway, I'm sorry. That didn't answer your question at all. Your question was, what was your question? Yeah.
No, again, I was saying that it would be a perception, right? Because as you mentioned, you're not trying to say what would not having girls. But
Yeah.
I sometimes sit there. I have a couple friends that just have sons,
Mhm.
and I only have daughters. So I'm like, what would I be like with that kid, like that one kid, right? Or to your point, uh, I worried a little bit about the same things. I'm like, well, I guess I can't do certain things with them. But then I'm like, well, why not? Like, I can take them hunting. I can take them outside. I can do the different things. I don't care what anybody says. That doesn't.
There's a company extremely dedicated to restoring the dignity of hard work and the relentless pursuit of greatness. That company is Fuel Hunt, and I am honored and humbled to have them as our sponsor. They have built a community that is all about choosing discipline over comfort and taking pride in the journey because comfort is a slow death. Their clothing isn't just apparel or fight gear, it is our uniform. 100% American made, Fuel Hunt clothing is a daily reminder for me and those around me that I am committed to being among the few who truly hunt for their goals. Join the movement today and wear your ambition proudly. Everybody wants to eat, but only a few will hunt. Follow the link in the show notes and use GrillDad at checkout for 10% off your purchase.
The majority of the time, girls they're just different than boys, and boys are just
Mhm.
different than girls, and the sensitivities and all these things. Again, I'm in my lane, so I may not know that to be a fact that I have experienced because I obviously don't have boys. However, in trying to do some of those things, I find my girls are like, for example, hunting, right? I made it a point to make sure my girls knew, hey, this is how food is gathered. Maybe not out in the woods and with a bow and whatever, but the meat you're eating here was an alive creature at some point. Let's just make sure we talk about that kind of thing, right? And then you
Yeah.
can decide whether you want to eat meat or not. And it came about by watching a hunting show, and I was just watching it on my own. And my daughter's like, "Oh, what are you watching?" Told her what I was watching, and so she's like, "Can I watch it?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, sit down." And we're watching it, and they kill a deer, and she's like, "They just killed a deer," and that's the first time I saw her sensitivity to that specific thing, right? I want to believe that a little boy also would have that sensitivity, but I also think back at when I was a kid, I don't think I did. Like I was like, I was that knuckle dragging kid that like wanted to go outside and like kill things and do things and not my girls, right? So I see that difference. And so sometimes with my friends who have all boys, I just think about that. Like, how would I have been with that specific kid at that specific age if I had that kid, right?
Yeah, I tell you the thing that I think about with, I have lots of friends who have girls, and
Mhm.
I think about how their experience is different. I would struggle if I had girls. I would really struggle with the accepting of risk
Mm,
and whenever it is appropriate to, encourage them to be tough. And with boys, it's super easy to not feel bad when they scrape their knee and stuff, and
right.
you say, quit crying, like you're fine. and thankfully my boys have turned out to be pretty tough, and sometimes I'm like, like, hey, you're my tough boy, right?
Yeah, yeah. Walk it
I'm
off.
like, yeah, I'm like, Jesus, is that a piece of hamburger meat hanging out the car? Like, you know, but, I really encourage them to get out of the house, and it's a struggle because the house is so entertaining, and there's so much there. There's everything's electronic. Why would
Hmm.
I go outside
Hmm.
whenever I've got all these cool toys and stuff? But I'm like, nope, get out, go down to the creek in the woods and go
Right.
find a shard of glass or something and bring it
Right.
back and throw it away. And sending, especially what I've got two brothers, and so I'll say, hey, your little brother wants to go, so go with him.
Right.
And that it's a little bit of responsibility,
Yeah.
but really they go when they play and then go having a little adventure, and that's what I want them to do. I would really struggle with that if I had girls, like to
Mm,
say, like, go out of my sight and like come back and tell me how it went. It's a lot easier with boys. I know that there's
yeah.
dangers there in either event, but the risk calculus is different. I don't know how I would ever let a girl out of my sight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had to work really tough with that. It's actually a great point that you bring up and a good talking perspective because I hadn't really thought about having boys once I started having girls. I think before our third, my wife wanted a third baby, and I was like, hey, just I actually need I need some time to make sure that I'm going to be okay with having a girl, because I just assumed I'm just having girls, and I did. I had a third girl, but I wanted to be okay with it because I just didn't want to be disappointed by that. Which interestingly, I never thought like, well, I want a boy. I never thought that. But I also in that moment before 2020 for my youngest, I remember thinking like, well, just let me come to grips with the fact that it's probably going to be a girl. And that actually happened really quickly because I think because I had my other two and I just kind of thought about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm a girl dad. That's cool. That's what I do. Um, but if I take it all the way back, man, when I was just having this conversation with Paul from Great Dad Talks, and I thought about it and I thought, I am meant to be a girl dad, especially with my first, because I did a lot of mistakes with my first daughter that I would have been a lot harsher with if I had had a boy. And with that thought process, I'm a boy. I was raised with little brothers and boy cousins, and in my mind, it would have been a lot easier for me to be tougher. It would have been a lot easier for me to be like, no, watch, you're fine. Like, just walk it off. Like, no, the arm will fix itself. Just keep going. Like, and I'm just telling you from my growing perspective, right? And I caught myself almost wanting to do that with my oldest because that's what I knew. And quickly I was like, this is not how I raise a girl. It was a weird feeling that I would get, like, this is not how I raise a girl. And then just to finish off the point, I am constantly like, no, you can't go there. No, you can't. You can't just leave the house. No, sorry. You have to take your sister. Like, it's hard for me with the knowledge of the evil that is around. And again, I don't know this to be a fact, but I also feel like if I had a boy, I'd be like, hey, be careful about this, this, and this. Go ahead and go.
Yeah.
Like,
And like if you break a limb, like that's probably for the best. You're just gonna make it tougher. Like
right.
we'll get it fixed and
Right.
it'll be a lesson,
Yeah. Yeah, and again, we're all given a playbook. I mentioned that many times, right? We're given a playbook as we grow up by our fathers, by the people around us. I grew up in a pretty customary Hispanic household, so
Yeah.
a boy is a boy, and they're gonna go play, and they're gonna go do stupid stuff, and the girls get taken care of differently, and so again, that was my playbook. So in thinking that, I'm like, man, I'm kind of glad I didn't have a boy because I think it would have sucked for that little boy to deal with me in that manner. And again, just looking back, not because I wanted to do that, but just because of of seeing myself with my daughter, and then thinking, had that been a boy, how would I have reacted to X, Y, Z? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing you said, I was meant to be a girl dad. This is a philosophical point, but I'm a philosophical guest.
Uh-huh.
You're meant to be what you are,
Yeah.
and
Right.
and that is a position that the ancient Stoics had is that fate is a cosmic plan. It
Mm.
has been decided. Basically, all events occur according to antecedent events that range back in this chain of causality that goes back to the beginning of time.
Mm.
And there you were not going to be anything other than what you are. and
Right.
and so the idea that I was meant to be something else, but I'm trapped in this reality that is like, no, you're not. You have to deal with your reality,
Right.
and you were exactly where you're supposed to be.
When I think that's where Stoicism really helps, because you have to take responsibility for that reality. You're in it. It's
Yeah.
yours. And then you have to, I used to say you have to accept your reality, or whatever it is, but I now think you have to embrace it. And I don't think I embraced it very well when I first became a father, right? And then later on, like now, when and this happened through one of our episodes that I had, but when someone says, "Hey, are you going for the boy next?" I'm like, "No, man, I'm good." Like, what's wrong with my girls, right? Now,
Yeah.
I'm not triggered by things, so I'm not like gonna get upset at someone for saying that. But I reflect and think, when I used to be told that early on, right? Like, my first daughter came, and they're like, "Oh, you going for the boy?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, maybe, I don't know, you know." But I wouldn't give it a second thought. Now it's like, no, this is where I need to be. Like, these are my girls. I'm a girl dad, and I'm all for it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but again, it's not just accepting those things. It's embracing these things and then finding ways to be better at that thing that you need to embrace.
Yeah, because you can't quit. You're
I mean, I
you're
guess
not
you
getting a
can.
different
It's
job.
just that
Yeah,
would that's not that doesn't help anybody,
right, right.
right?
No,
And we unfortunately we see dads quit, and that's what we don't
that's
want.
yeah, that's just devastating to
It is
to all involved. Yeah.
absolutely.
So I thought that I was done it too.
Mm,
And we had a lot of health struggles, and I don't need to get all that on the air, but they don't, what they don't tell you about? They don't freaking tell you about miscarriages whenever you're a young
yeah,
man, and hey, young men, go read up on how common it is.
right.
But I thought we were done it too. And then I was at sea on a submarine, and whenever we go on a mission or something like that, we cut off all communication,
Mm,
and then whenever we come back from it, we start clearing communication, start clearing email and stuff like that. But it doesn't come back in order. So I found
okay.
out that we were having a boy before I found out that we were pregnant.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, this is exciting. Hey, Captain, guess what?
Yeah,
And
you're like, wait, how
I-
did that happen?
yeah, apparently it's mine. You know? So
That's funny.
yeah, yeah. What was actually particularly funny about it is that it happened because we were on a 6-month deployment, and she, like, halfway through the deployment, we did a port call in Guam, and so she came and visited with me, and we stayed in a hotel in Guam for several days, and then we went on. I went on my mission and everything like that. And so when I'm coming back from a 6-month deployment, there's my wife on the pier,
Mm.
visibly 3 months pregnant.
Oh wow,
And so all the wives, you can see the gears turning in their head. They're like, oh,
trying to do math.
yeah, 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 yeah. And like, no, it's cool, Guam.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Now, with your three boys, what? How old is your oldest boy?
He's 12.
He's 12, so he's getting to that age where he's noticing girls.
He is I don't want to. He acts like he's too cool for school.
Okay.
He's
Oh, yeah.
he's still he doesn't want to. What is the word that they use? He doesn't want to be a rizzler.
Yeah.
He says this kid language. You learn on this kid language. He's like, no, I don't want to be a skibbity rizzler. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
well, we'll just let this. Nature's gonna figure this one out. Let me know when you want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'll be right here. Yeah.
What is as a father of sons? What is a big thing for you to teach your sons about girls?
Well, they're pretty awesome. Everything is through the context of mom. That's
Right.
basically how, and it's all in how happy that we are together, and how important mom is to our unit and to my
Hmm.
life, and how just empty I'd be without her. I think that there will be a lot more conversation. I go through them in my head, and we just don't
Yeah.
really have them at this
Yeah.
stage
Yeah.
yet. And so I haven't really experienced a lot of that yet, but I have them all in my head of, like, we're gonna talk about it. Like, I'm gonna encourage them to get married later in life. Mom and
Right.
I got married at 27, and like, that was perfect for both of
Mhm.
us. And any earlier than that, and we would have probably made some foolish decisions. So so to answer your question, Oscar, like, we don't really talk about it a whole lot. It's really
Mhm.
more like the lived example of how mom and dad
Yeah.
interact.
Well, maybe it gives you a little bit of solace with it. In talking to some of my friends with boys, my daughter's 13, so they're about the same age. Um, I've learned that is more common than not. This is what I mean. My 13-year-old will come home and jabber and think out loud about boy X, boy Z, what they're doing, the whole Rizzler thing, who's dating who, and I'm like, first of all, we're not dating. I don't see any. I don't see any of these little boys coming to the house, coming up to the front door and asking to date my daughter.
Yeah,
That's
that's
this
not
is
a
not
thing.
happening. Right? Exactly. I said, second of all, holy moly, you've got just so many thoughts. And then I talk to my buddies who have boys. They're like, that never happens, dude. That is because dude, at 12, I may have noticed a girl here and there, but I was knuckle dragging everywhere else. I didn't think about those things.
Yeah.
And I get these these thoughtful conversations from my daughter about her friend, and she's dating this person, and her boyfriend is so whatever. And I'm like, her boyfriend's 13. He doesn't even know that she's thinking 100 of these things, right? And it's not because he's dumb. It's just
It's 'cause he's
there's a
13.
difference.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's where the question came up, because in contrast, I mean, William, like, I'll sometimes sit for an hour, not say a word because my daughter just went, right?
They'll just yammer.
Yeah, and a lot of it I've noticed, a lot of it is thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Because I used to stop and ask her this or tell her this, and I had a good buddy of mine that would tell me, like, hey, just sit there and listen. A lot of it is thinking out loud, and data tells us that women tend to do that more than men, than boys, and I can tell you that as a grown man, my wife will think out loud. She'll talk to me about certain things, and then I try to fix it. And she's like, I don't need you to fix this. I'm just telling you,
Yeah.
right? Where I'm like internalizing everything. Things go the little wheels inside the head start burning a little bit because I'm just thinking through things, and I'm not speaking them out loud.
Yeah. You want to see, well, there's your problem.
Yeah,
That's
exactly
the worst
right.
thing to say.
Exactly right.
That's what they did not want to hear.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things that I get asked about sometimes is like, do you teach Stoicism to your kids? And if so, how do you? And I really don't. We don't talk about philosophers and stuff like that. I figure there will be time for that whenever they're older, and I'm not going to bore them to tears. I already bore them with enough stuff. But there's certain principles. One of the things that I think is very useful that has play in this conversation that is, what are the virtues? And so the Stoics basically, and the Stoics didn't come up with this idea. They actually inherited it from Plato, and a whole lot of other things like religions and everything also inherited this from Plato. But the idea of the cardinal virtues of wisdom, courage, self-control, and justice.
Right.
And the idea is that they work like the primary colors of red, yellow, and blue, in that any other color, any other virtue is some mixture or derivative of those four, but they don't reduce any further. There's nothing, you can't break them up anymore, but that's what makes up an ideal human being. And that's gender neutral, they're writing about, they say this is what a man is, but
Right.
they mean this is what a human is. And so that's one of the things, like, all right, boys, what's the virtues? And they'll have to name those off, and like, okay, what are they? Describe what is fortitude, or what is courage? What is temperance or moderation or self-control? And just being able to name them, just being able to say, like, that's what an ideal human is. Like, that's 80% of the battle there, is just being able to say, you look at some, Machiavellian bastard that's rich and successful, and you can say, like, well, is that person just? Okay, well, that's not an ideal human. I don't want to be like that.
Right.
And that you get a lot of traction out of that. The other principle that you keyed me off on whenever, what you were just talking about, is the idea that you are absolutely responsible for your actions, and nobody can make you do anything. Even if someone puts a gun to your head, that's still the choice to live is still a choice. And that's an extreme and radical view, but that is the Stoic position, that, no one can make you do anything. And that has so much play in all these little kid arguments and kid problems of, their inclination to want an excuse for whatever they, wherever they fell short. So-and-so made me do this, or because this happened, I did, and they know it's not going to go anywhere with me. But the best victory is whenever I hear, they're fighting or something, and and like, oh, Danny made me hit him, and then Danny says, Dan, no one can make you do anything. I'm just like, yes, winning,
Right.
That's right. That wasn't really an answer to your questions, but you made me think of it with what we were just talking about.
No, I think it really, moves this conversation in that direction because similarly, you probably get oh, it fell.
Right.
What, the cup just jumped off the counter and fell? Well, no, I knocked it over. I'm like, okay, that's what we say. In another, just to your point, I don't think I've ever talked to my girls about Stoic principles, but I will tell you that I try to live those and hope that that's what they're taking, right? And we do talk about the courage to do things and how people cannot make you do things or feel things. That's yours. That's you
Yeah.
own that. Similarly, I work really hard on my language instead of
It's hard,
saying,
man.
yeah. Well, instead of saying, "Hey, you made me mad,"
Yeah.
I say, "I'm mad now," right? And I've told my two older, because the little one still doesn't concept everything, but I've told them, I said, hey, you're not responsible for my emotion. Like, that's like, no matter how happy or mad I am, you're not responsible for that. That's mine to take care of. I hope to not react to you in a certain way, but sometimes I do. And that's mine. That's my fault. That's not your fault. And it's an effort to let them know I'm responsible for me and my actions and my reactions. And then in turn, you're responsible for yours, for you,
Yeah.
for your reactions and interactions.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great example of, this is what a man does,
Right. Yeah.
accepts responsibility. And, that's the idea. That's the definition.
Right. And that thought process takes me to a conversation I had with another one of my guests where I I'm trying to raise strong and dependable humans, right? And
Yeah.
and that is, to your point, it's gender neutral. I want them to have these virtues and to be able to be that righteous person and then also be dependable. And I used to say independent, man. I used to say I want to raise strong, independent women. And I was saying it wrong. It's strong and dependable. Yes, I want them to be very capable to do all the things by themselves, to do all these, all the things that we talk about in independent. But I also want them to be dependable humans
Yeah,
because a
that's really good.
dependable,
That's a really
right?
good distinction. Yeah.
And I didn't have that before, but a dependable human will then be with other humans. We're meant to be with other people. We're not just independent and only, you might have the less than 1% of people that can go live on the woods by themselves. Everybody else will go crazy because we're
Yeah.
supposed to be with other people.
Yeah.
And if we're not dependable, then other people don't accept us into that fold. And so, again, I don't want them to be uh, accepted for the sake of acceptance. I just want them to be dependable. And part of that is having that self awareness of, hey, I'm responsible for my actions. I'm responsible for everything that I do. And one very important thing, at least with my girls, is reactions. You're responsible for your reaction, right? My oldest likes to watch crime stuff on TV. And I'm like, every so often you'll hear about the crime of passion, right? Someone just lost it and did something horrible. And I'm like, that's a complete and utter loss of emotion. That's emotion taking over and then doing this thing, right? That's why it's so important for us to be able to manage our emotions and do these
Yeah,
things.
that's what a toddler does.
Right.
I've had this with. I'm sure you've dealt with this with young airmen and stuff like that. I've had the young sailors who get angry at something and will like smash a laptop or something
Yeah.
and like, wow, I was so angry. I'm just so manly. I can't help my
Right.
I'm
It's
just
so masculine.
I'm
Yeah.
so angry and masculine. Like that is what a toddler does,
Right.
And now that laptop's coming out of your pay.
But it's such an important thing, and I try to make that distinction with my daughter. I'm like, there's adults, because one thing that I'm horrible at, and my wife is very good at reminding me. Our daughters, our kids, their frontal lobe is still developing, so the whole emotional control thing is wholly different than it should be for us, right? But I tell her, I'm like, hey, you're fine. You're a regular human. Your loss of emotion there, no problem. Let's just talk about it, right? I'm like, there's adults that I deal with that will act like a toddler. And we actually say those exact words, like toddlers do this thing. People who control their emotions don't need to do that, right?
Yeah.
And just so everybody knows, they'll call me on my crap as well, because when when I lose my emotion over, particularly we have this one dog that it's still a puppy and it just drives me nuts, and they'll just look at me like, "Hey, you're losing your emotions." I'm like, "Golly, I just want to lose them even more because now I'm just
Yeah.
pissed." But they'll call me on that, and I think it's a good thing because they're realizing, they're seeing it. It's not a good thing I'm losing my emotions, guys. I'm just saying it's a good thing that they're calling me on it because they are aware of that.
I think that there's a tremendous amount of power in just naming it and
Yeah,
just identifying that, like, oh, I am in an emotional state
yeah,
right
yeah,
now. Like that's half the battle. And
yeah.
because that like kind of takes you a little bit out of the zoom out a little bit and like, okay, I am experiencing this emotion regardless of it whether it's valid or not.
Mm-hmm.
I am experiencing it. That is, I'm not going to deny that. And that's kind of the difference between managing your emotions and suppressing them.
Right,
Suppressing them is saying like, I'm not angry. Like bullshit. You are
right.
angry.
Yeah,
you know? And but being able to say like, okay, I am really angry for reason XYZ.
yeah.
My follow-on action is Q. So
And
I
and
think being able to name it is huge.
correct me if I'm wrong. That's a big misconception of Stoicism, right? It's not so much suppressing an emotion; it's being able to understand what that emotion is, and then being able to know how to react to that emotion.
Yeah, well, the basic idea there that is that emotions are judgment calls, and
Mm,
this is a thing that and like you said at the very beginning of the podcast, that like, hey, I wouldn't call myself a stoic. I don't call myself a stoic. A lot of people
mm-hmm,
do, and
mm-hmm,
I don't dispute anyone who does. I don't like have a problem with anyone that does, but I find that philosophical labels are just more cumbersome and they cause more problems than they solve for
mm,
me at least. And so I just, in my writing and everything, like I say, okay, when I say stoic, I mean someone who lived 2000 years ago, and we can look at their philosophy and how they thought about things. And then it's incumbent on us to come up with our own. Like that's how you think like a philosopher is. You don't just say like, okay, I'm going to adopt this philosophy. Now that's my philosophy. I'm going to put it on like a suit of armor or something like
right,
that. Now, okay, what do I believe? Like that's not how this works.
right.
You encounter the ideas and you interact with them and you say like, okay, well, maybe that's a good framework, a good way of thinking of things. And maybe it doesn't apply in some of these other situations. But the idea with emotions is that there's some judgment underlying them that is, if I'm really worried about my, this presentation I have tomorrow, that is because I have it in my head that it going badly would be a legitimately bad thing,
Mm-hmm,
when in fact, perhaps it would be an indifferent thing. It would not necessarily, if I try my best, I do what I'm supposed to do, and it still goes badly, then, okay. Or if someone makes me angry, someone cuts me off in traffic, and I'm upset about that thing. The Stoic view is that that is a judgment that I've been harmed in some way, when in fact
mm-hmm,
I have not been harmed.
right.
Or my boss yells at me, like I've
Yeah,
not been harmed. It's hot air.
right.
And so those, you basically isolate the underlying judgment. And the where the Stoics get really radical is in that view that virtue is the sole good. Virtue is the only thing that is good. And so if it's not reflective of my virtue, it is indifferent. So I mean, they are so extreme that in the like orthodox Stoic view, if I get diagnosed with a brain tumor tomorrow, that is not a bad thing. That is an indifferent thing that now I have to deal with. It is navigating the weather, you know. Now, in my, I am not necessarily an orthodox Stoic. If I get diagnosed with a brain tumor, I'm going to be very unhappy about that,
Right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But it's useful as a framework for thinking through things, to know how that
Mm,
viewpoint works. And it happens that these, the people who developed cognitive behavioral therapy in like the 50s or so were actually deeply read in the Stoics. And so
mm,
whenever you go to psychotherapy, a lot of the things that they teach you are these mental techniques for self-diagnosing your emotions and stuff
okay.
like that are really kind of based on a lot of Stoic teachings. And so it's
Interesting.
not necessarily they're just doing Stoicism, it's more of a refined version of it,
Yeah, yeah.
or a refined version of a lot of the teachings. But there's a lot of parallel there and a lot
Yeah.
of overlap, and that's kind of part of the reason that a lot of people who get into Stoicism and find that it helps them with mental health
Mm-hmm.
issues And that's, you know, in my theory, that is largely explanatory to why it's blowing up right now, is because you have a mental health crisis going on
Hmm.
also. And so it's kind of one feeds the other, I think.
Give me a few like tangible tips that fathers can use within those principles that you have found yourself using more and more with your sons.
Okay. I will cut straight to the most extreme one.
Okay.
And this is controversial and it's hard to think about, but it's like straight out of the Stoic philosophy. So you might as well deal with it.
Okay.
It's called in the popular Stoicism sphere, they'll call this practice negative visualization. In the kind of older, more academic literature, they'll call it premeditato malorum, which means, you know, premeditation of evil or
Okay.
thinking about a bad thing. But Epictetus, you know, my favorite Stoic philosopher, and then Marcus Aurelius after him, both say at some point, you know, whenever you kiss your child good night, you know,
Hmm.
think about this child could die in their sleep,
Right.
and to visualize that viscerally, you know. And that sounds to you and me like self-torture. Like why would I do that? That's such a, you know, incomprehensibly horrible thing to think about.
Hmm.
But what that does and where the value in that exercise is, and you don't necessarily need to think about that horrible thing, but there are other negative things. Imagine that I get
Yeah.
fired tomorrow. Imagine I get
Right.
medically disqualified from my job. Whatever. Think about this negative event, and that helps place things in perspective
Hmm.
such that you can cherish every moment that that event is not true. You know, and whenever you wake up
Yeah.
in the morning and child is still sleeping soundly in their bed, rejoice. I'm so happy, you know, that things are in fact the way that they are. And
Yeah.
it's a very good and useful way of kind of placing, you know, counting your blessings and placing all of the amazing things that we have in perspective. And that is probably the most salient, you know, parenting thing that's even in Stoicism, because it shows up in several places, and they're kind of known for that, of like, man, that's really screwed up. Like imagining your kids
Right.
dying, like, well, you know, you know, whenever you're really upset, whether you step on a Lego, you know, kind of can help you get through that and put things into perspective.
It really does. It reminds me several times of like the annoyances, right? And I realize they're not going to be here forever. Like those annoyances, I will miss the
Yeah.
the clothes and the chores not done and these little things. Like they're not going to be here forever. In full disclosure, that thought process actually is part of why the podcast is here, because I thought, well, if and when I'm gone, this will be here, and they'll be able to listen to this, and they'll be able to realize that I'm here thinking of how to be better for them every day.
Yeah.
Um, and so, to me, it's not very controversial. Like to me, it's like that. I've actually thought of that many times through the readings as well. I'm like, oh man, that's crazy. Like, why am I getting annoyed at X Y Z when the bigger thing is them, right? And I think that's a really useful thought process.
And that ties into kind of what you said is, you know, I'm gonna be gone someday. It's not a if I'm gone someday. It's like you know, I'm gonna be worm food, and in the grand scheme of things, sometime soon.
Right?
And
Yeah.
that's another one of those mental practices that the Stoics teach is called memento mori, or
Mm-hmm.
remember that you are mortal. You know, and it actually ties back to a practice that in the ancient Roman triumphs, whenever a conquering general would return to Rome and would be, you know, paraded through the town, and just everyone's cheering for him and throwing flower petals on
Mm-hmm.
him and everything, he'd have a slave standing behind him, whispering in his ear, "Remember always that you are mortal," and kind of
Mm.
repeating that. And that is as kind of a healthy mental exercise to recognize that all of this that you're seeing
Right.
around you is illusion. You know, at the end of the day, you know, you're gonna be gone. and
Right.
and the kids are like, that's the closest thing you've got to a lasting contribution, you
Yeah.
know, and
Absolutely.
that is by far the most meaningful contribution that you've got. And that plays into, you know, we raise the boys when we talk about things like competition between one another and getting along. And, the boys bicker and they get jealous of each other and they fight. And you see people who are adults who are estranged from their siblings and stuff like that. And so we make it clear to them every day, like, that is not what we want for you. Like, no matter how much your brother pisses you off, you need to recognize that he's your brother, and you ultimately need to take care of each other, because mom and dad are going to be gone, and that's just a fact. And mom and dad need to know that you're going to take care of each other whenever we're gone, and that's important to us,
Right.
for you, and that's a thing. You'll see some dads of boys will like really encourage like try to pit one boy against another to try to, hope that they will grow stronger that way. I don't really believe that we have that level of it's going to make that big of a difference,
Right.
but it certainly could foster some, I don't discourage
Yeah.
competition between the two, but it's very important that we don't play favorites. Mom and I talk about that a whole lot of,
Mm.
you know, we're naturally going to favor one kid over the other for certain things. One kid's a lot more fun to do this activity with, and another kid's a lot more fun to do that activity with. And we can acknowledge that, but we're not going to have a favorite kid,
Right.
and
Right.
one kid's going to be more problematic than another, behaviorally and all these things. One kid is less, you know, good at interacting socially with adults and stuff like that, and that tends to make adults that want to naturally favor one over the other. And we recognize that, identify it, and say, okay, well, we're not gonna do that. An important book that I really affected my parenting outlook was Steven Pinker's The Blank Slate, which
Okay.
came out. I don't know if you've heard of it, but Steven Pinker writes some
Mm.
really phenomenal books. But he's a Harvard philosopher, psychotherapist, neurologist, one of those kind of multi-talented dudes that writes a lot of important stuff. But the blank slate, the basic idea is it gets at the idea that human beings are blank slates when they're born, and just it's kind of the nature versus nurture argument. And a lot of people tend to think that it's all nurture, and I've got to do all these things, and if I stub my toe and curse, now that's some butterfly effect result is that the kid's now not going to go to college, and the blank slate, really, there's a lot of evidence that really discounts that. And it really seems that it's mostly nature. And you can definitely screw it up. You can definitely make things worse for them. But up to a point, there's just not that much that you can do that's going to make the difference between whether they're going to be a doctor or, a nurse or whatever.
Right.
Like, you got to get them to adulthood.
Well, and I think for parents, maybe it's just me, but if you have multiple kids, you see that. You see, like, you see the difference in each one of the kids. You're like, how are you so much different than your sister? And I think it's evident. Again, I'm
Yeah.
not a I'm not a scientist, but I see my girls, and I'm like, they're drastically different from each other.
Yeah, and I had to have two kids for me to really accept that, because growing
Right.
up, you see a kid misbehaving in the grocery store, and you're like, oh, that parent, if that parent would parent better, then that kid wouldn't be misbehaving, and and then you have one kid, and you're like, what? Why are you misbehaving? I'm doing all the things that you're supposed to
Right.
do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and why do you have agency? You
Yeah.
know?
Absolutely.
And then I have a second one, and like, oh, you're two entirely different people, and you're raised exactly the same, and yet you're completely different. And I'm just I'm just keeping you alive.
Right.
You
Just
know?
making you're building the ship on the water. Like, that's really what you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Well, hey, man, I know I've taken a lot of your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. I want people to know where to find you, where to find your book. Obviously, we're going to put a bunch of links at the show notes for you guys to get to that quickly. But give us just a little bit of where people can find you, whether it's social media, is it your website, those kinds of things.
Yeah. So the book is called Stoicism as a Warrior Philosophy: Insights on the Morality of Military Service. It is available on Amazon, and it's at Barnes and Noble and all that stuff. My website is williamcspears.com. I just use that. That's basically a place I hang essays and stuff like that. Before I wrote the book, I also published articles and stuff like that on just random military stuff. I'm one of those military nerds that just writes articles because I don't have better stuff to do. That's where you can find me. One thing I'll leave your readers with that I think is just a valuable tool that is useful and as useful in parenting as anything else. The appeal to coherency. So the old philosophers, like you have the different schools of Athens that would attack each other. Basically, what they would they would try to attack one another and say that hey, your ideas are incoherent. You believe this, but you don't believe that. And so the coherency, if your ideas are not agreeing with each other, that's kind of a test for like something screwed up about your philosophy. And I think that's very useful for a lot of things. It's really captured well in this statement by, one of my favorite philosophers is a guy he's actually not Stoic, but he's Stoic adjacent, named Cicero. Cicero took an idea from Socrates. Socrates, 500 years before Cicero, was walking around doing the Socrates thing, asking these impossible questions. And one of them was, okay, what is good? And he came to the conclusion that, a good act is that which is both honorable and useful. Cicero took that and extrapolated it and said, like, well, if we really know what's going on, if we really think hard enough, we recognize that which is honorable is useful. And conversely, that which is not honorable is not useful. And recognizing that truth, that basically whatever dishonorable thing that seems to be expedient in the short term, if I zoom out far enough, or if I think from a high enough philosophical perspective, I will recognize that is not useful. And what is honorable, if it is the right thing, it is ultimately going to be worth it and ultimately going to be useful. I think that applies to so many things in life. And I think that's important things to teach the kids too.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Well, William, I can't thank you enough for the time, the conversation. Obviously, on Veterans Day, we're both on here jabbing it up about having our kids and how we're fathering them. And I really appreciated your perspective without having girls, but also just the philosophies that you brought forward that can help any father out there.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, man. I hope all of you took a lot of notes. If not, go back, listen to this episode again. And until then, we'll see you later.
This has been the Daughter Podcast. Be sure and share this show with a friend. Like, subscribe, follow us on social media, and leave us a review. For everything Girl Dad, head over to daughterpodcast.com. That's daughterpodcast.com.